been a long time since I felt anything remotely normal. My life became a nightmare the moment I stepped into the night shift at the McDonald's in Chillicothe. Most people would say it's just a fast food job, easy, routine, and boring. But it became something else entirely for me. Something dark. I work the graveyard shift, the hours when everyone else is asleep and the world is at its quietest. Most nights, it's just me, Steve the cook, and Megan, a new girl who barely says a word. She's shy, keeps to herself. Steve's laid back, doesn't care much about anything as long as the paycheck comes in. I used to be like Steve, disconnected, indifferent. But things change when you start losing sleep, and your reality begins to twist in ways that make you question your sanity. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. It was around 3 a.m., the dead of night. Some car pulled into the drive-thru, and the speaker crackled to life. "Can I get a burger with vanilla ice cream?" I figured it was a prank. People pull that stuff all the time during these hours. Drunk, or just bored, trying to mess with the night crew. I laughed it off and gave Steve the weird order. But when I looked at the car, something about it didn't sit right with me. The headlights were on, but the driver? He was just a shadow, shrouded in darkness, sitting too still. Too quiet. I tried to get a better look, but he never stepped into the light. Steve handed me the order, and I walked to the window, feeling an odd tension I couldn't explain. I expected to see some kid or drunk guy, but the driver never showed their face. Just a hand reached out, pale and bony, grabbing the bag and disappearing into the blackness. I couldn't even see the car leave, as if it vanished the moment the hand retracted. I brushed it off, told myself it was just one of those weird encounters. But it happened again. The next night, same time, different order, same car, or at least it looked like it. A different voice, but that same shadowy figure, hiding in the dark, not stepping forward. This time, they asked for fries, with a side of coffee. What the hell, right? This went on for days. Every night, like clockwork, a car would show up at 3 a.m., make some bizarre request, and drive off into the abyss. The worst part? No one else seemed to notice. Steve didn't care. He'd shrug it off, say something like, "People are weird, man," and go back to his cooking. Megan, though, I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. Hell, I was too. But I didn't want to admit it. The orders started getting personal. One night, the voice at the speaker asked for a milkshake, but they didn't just ask for any milkshake. They asked for it the way my late wife used to. Extra thick. No whipped cream. No one else could have known that. No one. I remember standing there, frozen, trying to understand how a stranger could know something so intimate. I stared at the monitor, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. But it didn't. Nothing did. And when I handed the order through the window, that same pale hand reached out, taking the shake without a word. I'm not a superstitious guy. I've never believed in ghosts or demons or whatever, but something about this wasn't right. It was like the darkness was watching, learning, waiting for the right moment to pull me in. And that's when I realized it already had. It's been a few nights since that first weird encounter at the drive-thru. At first, I tried to laugh it off. I mean, who orders a burger with ice cream smashed on top? Probably some punk kid just messing with me. But now, I don't know. Something's off, and I can't quite shake the feeling. Last night, the same thing happened. The clock had just hit 3 a.m. when that old, beat-up car rolled up again. It's always too dark to see inside. The headlights cast long shadows across the parking lot, and I swear it feels like those shadows are watching me. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" I called through the speaker, trying to keep my voice steady. But there was that familiar silence again, the kind that makes your skin crawl. And then, the voice, low, almost a whisper, asked for the same thing, a burger with ice cream. I stared at the screen for a moment, my finger hovering over the buttons. Something told me not to take the order, but I did it anyway. Just a burger and a scoop of vanilla. What's the harm, right? As I handed the bag out the window, I tried to get a better look at the driver. But no matter how hard I strained my eyes, all I saw was a figure sitting unnaturally still in the driver's seat. It wasn't just that I couldn't see their face. It's like they didn't want me to. The car didn't move right away. It just sat there, engine idling, the sound filling the dead silence of the night. For a second, I thought about asking if everything was okay, but something in my gut told me to keep my mouth shut. Eventually, the car rolled away, disappearing into the darkness just as quickly as it had arrived. When I turned around, Steve was standing there, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost," he joked, flipping a spatula in his hand. Steve never takes anything seriously. I wish I had his attitude. Yeah, I muttered, trying to shake off the tension. "It's nothing, just a weird order." But it wasn't nothing, because tonight, it happened again. Same car, same order, same eerie feeling creeping up my spine. I told Steve about it during our break, hoping he'd have some kind of explanation. "It's probably just some night shift regular," he shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "People are weird at 3 a.m., you should know that by now." Megan, on the other hand, looked worried. She's been quiet since she started working the night shift, but I can tell the whole situation's freaking her out. Maybe you should report it," she said softly, her eyes wide with concern. I laughed it off, trying to ease the tension. Report what? A creepy burger order? But deep down, I knew Megan had a point. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't keep ignoring it. When the clock hit 3 a.m. again, I braced myself. Sure enough, the car showed up like clockwork. This time, though, I didn't just feel uneasy. I felt scared. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I handed over the order. And just as the car was pulling away, I swear I heard something. A whisper, soft but clear as day. "Jake." My heart stopped. How did they know my name? I didn't tell anyone about the whisper at first. I mean, it could have been my imagination, right? The late nights, the weird orders, the eerie silence. It was all starting to mess with my head. That's what I tried to convince myself, anyway. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next night, I was on edge from the moment my shift started. Every time a car pulled up, I'd flinch, expecting that same beat-up vehicle to appear, expecting that voice to call my name again. But for the first few hours, nothing happened. It was just the usual drunks, night owls, and insomniacs grabbing their greasy fast food before crashing it home. Steve was his usual laid-back self, cracking jokes and flipping burgers like he didn't have a care in the world. Megan, though, she seemed different. Jittery, like she could feel something coming too. Around 2:45 a.m., the store was dead quiet. I was wiping down the counter when Megan came over, biting her lip. "Jake," she whispered, glancing around like someone might overhear. Do you think it's going to happen again tonight?" I didn't have to ask what she meant. We both knew. "I don't know," I muttered, trying to sound casual, but my voice shook a little. "Maybe it's just a prank, you know? Some weirdo who thinks it's funny to mess with us." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Megan just nodded, her eyes darting to the clock. 2:50 a.m. We both felt it. The tension building, the silence thickening, like the air was pressing down on us. At 3 a.m. sharp, the car appeared. I swear, my heart skipped a beat when I saw those dim headlights creeping toward the drive-thru. The car pulled up to the speaker, and I felt frozen, my hand hovering over the button. "Welcome to McDonald's," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Can I take your order?" Silence. Then, the voice. "Burger with ice cream." I knew it was coming, but hearing it again sent a chill straight down my spine. I punched in the order, my hands trembling, and went to prepare the food. Megan was watching me the whole time, her face pale. As I walked back to the window, the feeling hit me again. The sense that I shouldn't be doing this, that something terrible was about to happen. But what was I supposed to do? Refuse to give them the order? That wasn't exactly an option. When I got to the window, I hesitated. My fingers brushed against the edge of the paper bag, but I didn't hand it out right away. I just stood there, staring at the car, waiting. The same still figure was sitting inside, unmoving, like it had been every other night. And then I heard it again. "Jake?" It was clearer this time, more distinct, like the voice wasn't coming from the car at all, but from right behind me. I spun around, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the kitchen was empty. Just me, the dim light, and the quiet hum of the appliances. When I turned back, the car was still there, but now I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. My throat was dry. My palms were sweaty. Slowly, I reached out and handed the bag through the window. The figure's hand, pale, almost gray, grasped it, and for a split second, I caught a glimpse of something in the darkness of the car. A face, just barely visible in the shadows, hollow eyes, a crooked smile. And then it was gone. The car rolled away, disappearing into the night as if it had never been there. I stood there, staring into the darkness, my heart racing, my mind spinning. "Jake?" I jumped, my whole body jolting at the sound of Megan's voice. She was standing behind me, looking just as shaken as I felt. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Hear what?" I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. They said my name." Megan's eyes went wide and she took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jake, we need to tell someone. This isn't normal." I didn't argue. For once, I couldn't brush it off. Something was seriously wrong, and I had no idea what to do about it. As we stood there, staring out into the empty parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. And whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be good. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. Not the customers, not the orders. My mind kept going back to that voice, that face in the shadows. Every creak of the floor, every distant sound outside, made me jump. I could tell Megan was feeling the same. We both kept glancing out the windows, expecting that car to show up again. It didn't. But the feeling lingered. The heaviness, the sense that something was watching us from just beyond the edge of the lights. When 6 a.m. finally rolled around, I practically bolted out of the door. I wasn't the only one. Megan had been just as eager to leave. The two of us exchanged a quick glance. No words, just a look that said, "We'll talk later." But we didn't. We both just wanted to get out of there. I didn't sleep when I got home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hollow, staring eyes, that crooked smile lurking in the dark. The whisper of my name still echoed in my ears. It was like the whole experience had rooted itself in my brain, refusing to let go. By the time I had to head back for my next shift, I was exhausted. My nerves were shot. But there was no getting out of it. I needed the job. So I dragged myself back, hoping maybe tonight would be normal. Maybe it would be like before all this weird stuff started happening. No such luck. As soon as I walked into the store, I could tell something was off. Steve was in the back, but Megan wasn't anywhere in sight. She was supposed to be here. I checked the time. She was late. Megan was never late. I grabbed my phone and shot her a quick text. "You coming in tonight?" No reply. I stared at the screen, waiting for the little typing bubbles to pop up, but nothing. Just silence. The hours dragged by. It was a quiet night again. No big rushes, just the occasional car rolling through for their late-night fix. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, though. Like the air was charged with it, the same way it gets right before a storm hits. By 2 a.m., I still hadn't heard from Megan, and the knot in my stomach had only tightened. I kept checking the clock, waiting for 3 a.m., dreading it. When the time finally hit, I felt the tension peak. The drive-thru was dead, not a single car in sight. My hands were clenched so tightly around the counter that my knuckles had turned white. And then I heard it. A single, low rumble. I looked up. In the distance, just beyond the reach of the streetlights, I could see headlights. They were faint, but unmistakable. That same beat-up car was creeping toward the drive-thru again. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear my pulse in my ears as the car rolled up to the speaker. It stopped, and I stared at the monitor, waiting for the voice. Silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. I could feel the sweat trickling down my neck, my hands shaking as I reached for the button. "Welcome to McDonald's," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Can I take your order?" No response. I waited, holding my breath. Then, crackling through the speaker like some broken radio, the voice spoke again. This time, it was different, slower, harsher. "Where's Megan?" My heart stopped. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin, my hand slipping off the button. They knew her name. The dread that had been gnawing at me for days suddenly bloomed into full-blown panic. I stepped back from the monitor, my mind racing. Megan was missing. She hadn't shown up to work. Now, they were asking for her. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers shaking as I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Panic set in. I didn't know what to do. I could feel that car sitting there, just outside the window, waiting, watching. Without thinking, I leaned back toward the speaker. My voice was barely steady as I spoke. "Megan's not here." Silence. For a moment I thought maybe that was the end of it. Maybe the car would just leave, and I could breathe again. But then, through the static, I heard it. The voice, whispering, "She will be." The words hit me like ice. I felt frozen, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I'd just heard. What did that mean? What the hell did that mean? I backed away from the speaker, staring out into the darkness. The car was still there, its headlights dim, the figure inside unmoving. I couldn't do this anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know what was going on. Without thinking, I rushed out the door, my feet hitting the pavement as I made my way to the drive-thru. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging through my veins as I approached the car. But as I got closer, something changed. The air felt thicker, heavier. My vision blurred, my steps slowing like I was moving through water. And then I stopped. The car was empty. There was no one inside. No driver, no passenger. Just an open, empty seat staring back at me. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of it. Then behind me I heard it. A voice. "Jake." I froze, the sound of my name cutting through the silence like a blade. I whipped around, my eyes scanning the darkness, but there was no one there. Just the empty parking lot, stretching out in every direction. My mind raced. I hadn't imagined it. That voice, the same one that had whispered through the speaker, was now right behind me. I backed up slowly, my legs trembling beneath me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might explode. I wanted to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the ground, rooted in place by sheer terror. "Jake," it came again, softer this time, almost playful. It sounded so close, like someone was standing just inches away, breathing down my neck. I turned again, my pulse racing, but still, no one. I was losing it. The whole situation was unraveling, dragging me down with it. My mind scrambled for answers, for logic, but there was nothing to hold on to. No explanation, no reason. Just that creeping dread, gnawing at my insides like a sickness. I couldn't stand it anymore. I sprinted back to the store, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and slammed the door behind me, locking it tight. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the key. I leaned against the counter, trying to catch my breath, my mind reeling. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly jumped out of my skin, the sound jarring in the silence. With trembling hands I pulled it out. It was a text. From Megan. Help. That single word made my blood run cold. I stared at the screen, disbelief crashing over me. Megan had been missing all night, and now, this? Before I could even process it, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, a photo. It was a picture of the McDonald's, taken from outside. The front door. My door. My stomach dropped. Whoever had sent the text was right outside. I rushed to the window, my heart thundering in my chest. But when I looked out, I didn't see anyone. The parking lot was empty, the night as still as ever. But I knew they were out there. Watching. I stumbled back, gripping the counter for support. My mind was spinning, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and confusion. What the hell was going on? Where was Megan? Why was this happening? The silence in the store felt suffocating, pressing in on me from all sides. Every sound seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor under my feet. I felt like I was being watched from every angle, and then I heard it again. "Jake?" This time, it wasn't outside. It wasn't on the speaker. It was inside the store. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing in the shadows by the back door, was a figure. Tall, lanky, with a face hidden in the darkness. But I didn't need to see the face to know who it was. The voice, the presence, it all came crashing together in my mind. It was the same figure from the first night, the one in the car, the one that had whispered my name. And now it was here, in the store with me. I backed up, my heart pounding, my mind screaming at me to run, to do something. But my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer terror of the thing standing just a few feet away. The figure stepped closer, its movement slow and deliberate. As it moved into the light, I could finally make out its face. It was a man, or at least it had been once. His skin was pale, stretched tight over his bones, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. His lips curled into that same crooked smile I had seen through the window, and his eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, were fixed on me. "Where's Megan?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely more than a whisper. The man tilted his head, his smile widening. "She's waiting," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Waiting for you." Before I could react, the lights in the store flickered and went out, plunging the place into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone, the only light source I had left. I turned on the flashlight and spun it toward where the figure had been standing. He was gone. My breath came in shallow gasps as I whipped the beam around, searching the shadows. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, my mind unraveling as fear took over. Then, from the back of the store, I heard it. The faint sound of a door creaking open. The back door, but I knew I couldn't leave Megan. With trembling hands, I edged toward the back of the store, the narrow beam of light from my phone cutting through the pitch-black hallway. The sound of the door creaking grew louder, echoing through the silence. I reached the door and pushed it open, stepping out into the night air. There, in the shadows just beyond the light, stood Megan. At least, it looked like her. She was pale, her eyes wide and vacant, her face twisted in an expression of pure terror. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Only a low, raspy breath. "Megan?" I whispered, my voice shaking. But she didn't respond. She just stared at me, her mouth hanging open, her body stiff and unmoving. And then, from the darkness behind her, the figure appeared. The same crooked smile, the same empty eyes. He stepped up behind Megan, his bony hand resting on her shoulder, and for the first time, I saw what he was holding. A knife. Long and jagged, gleaming in the moonlight. Before I could scream, before I could move, he leaned down and whispered something into Megan's ear. And then with one swift motion, he dragged the blade across her throat. The last thing I heard was her gurgling scream as her body collapsed to the ground, and the figure, smiling, always smiling, disappeared into the night. I never went back to that McDonald's. No one ever found Megan's body. The police said she ran away, disappeared without a trace. But I know the truth. I know what happened that night. And now, every time I hear my name whispered in the dark, I wonder if he is still out there, waiting for me. It was just another ordinary night. Or at least, that's what I told myself when I locked the door and settled into my usual spot on the couch. My small, one-bedroom apartment had always been a safe haven, a place where the world couldn't touch me. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air seemed thicker, like the silence had weight, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're not alone, even when you know you should be. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. Work had been brutal, and my brain was fried. I grabbed the remote, flipping through channels, trying to find some mindless show to drown out the quiet. But the feeling wouldn't go away. My eyes kept drifting to the window, the one that looked out over the alleyway. Normally I didn't care about it. Nothing ever happened out there. Just a few trash cans, a flickering streetlight, and shadows that never meant anything. But tonight, those shadows felt like they were watching me. I tried to focus on the TV, but every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision made my heart race. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then I heard it, a knock, not on the door, on the window. I froze. Who the hell would knock on a second-story window? I slowly turned my head, my stomach tightening into a knot. There was no one there, just the alley bathed in the weak glow of the streetlight. But I knew what I heard. I couldn't have imagined it. My heart pounded in my chest, the kind of pulse that throbbed in my ears and made my skin tingle. I stared at the window for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Another knock. This time, louder, closer. I jumped up from the couch, grabbing the nearest thing that could pass as a weapon, an old umbrella. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I didn't move towards the window. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring, trying to make sense of what the hell was going on. That's when I saw it. The shadow. It wasn't just a trick of the light this time. There was something. Someone standing outside my window. A figure, tall and unmoving, just out of the reach of the streetlight. I couldn't make out their face, but I could feel them watching me, their eyes boring into me from the darkness. My skin crawled. My legs felt like they were made of lead, rooted to the spot. I didn't know what to do. call the cops, run, but I couldn't move, couldn't think. The knock came again, slow and deliberate, 3 knocks. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I heard it. Let me in. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, with that whispered command replaying in my head like a broken record. My mind was racing, trying to come up with some rational explanation for what was happening, but there wasn't one. Who could be out there? And how did they get to a second-story window? My apartment wasn't easy to access from the outside. I had made sure of that. But there it was, a voice, low and menacing, telling me to let it in. For a moment, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress of work, the long hours, and the isolation were getting to me. But then the knock came again, harder this time, more insistent. I snapped out of it and did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I ran. I bolted from the living room, leaving the umbrella behind, and dashed into the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was going to burst through my chest. I locked the door and backed away, eyes glued to the window on the far side of the room, half expecting to see that shadow standing there too. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood there in the dark, barely breathing, listening for any sign of movement, any indication that whatever was outside had gone. But I knew better. I could feel it, that oppressive weight in the air, like I wasn't alone in my own apartment anymore. And then I heard it again. Let me in. The voice wasn't coming from the living room window anymore. It was closer now, much closer. It was right outside the bedroom door. I stared at the door in disbelief, my body paralyzed with fear. There was no way someone could be inside. I had locked the front door, hadn't I? I always did. But the voice, it was so close, like it was standing right on the other side of the door, whispering through the crack. Let me in. The knock came next, soft and rhythmic, like they had all the time in the world. I backed up until I hit the far wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out, but my body refused to move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door, couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was on the other side wasn't human. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling over the screen as I tried to call for help. But there was no signal. Of course, there wasn't. I hadn't had issues with service in this apartment before, but now, when I needed it most, my phone was useless. The knocking continued, steady, unrelenting. I felt trapped, like a rabbit caught in a snare, waiting for the inevitable. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the room again, thick and unnatural. For a brief second, I thought maybe it had gone, maybe whatever was tormenting me had left. But then the door handle turned. The sound of the door handle turning sent a cold shockwave through my body. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. I stared, wide-eyed, at the handle slowly twisting, as if something, was calmly, methodically trying to open the door. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, my mind refusing to accept what was happening right in front of me. I backed further into the corner of the room, clutching my useless phone like it was some kind of lifeline. But I knew it wasn't. Nothing could help me now. The handle stopped moving. Silence. I waited, holding my breath, every second stretching into an eternity. The door didn't open, but I could feel something standing just on the other side, waiting, watching. And then, in the stillness, that voice came again, a whisper, so close it felt like it was inside the room with me. I'm here. A wave of nausea hit me. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My skin was crawling, and my heart was hammering so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that when I opened them, this would all be over. That I'd wake up in my bed, safe, and this would just be a twisted dream. But when I opened them, nothing had changed. The door was still closed, the air was still thick with dread, and I was still trapped in this nightmare. I know you can hear me. The voice wasn't coming from outside the door anymore. It was inside. I could hear it, clear as day, but I couldn't place where it was coming from. It felt like it was everywhere, like it was echoing inside my head, crawling into my thoughts. I pushed myself against the wall, trying to ground myself in reality. But reality was slipping away. This wasn't real, it couldn't be. And yet the door began to rattle. Not just the handle this time, but the whole doorframe shook, like something was trying to force its way in. The wood groaned under the pressure, and I could hear the soft scraping of nails or claws against it. I wanted to scream, but the sound was stuck in my throat. All I could do was watch in horror as the door shuddered and shook, ready to give in at any second. Then, without warning, it stopped. The rattling ceased, the silence fell again, and for a brief, stupid moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I was safe. But then I heard it. A low, guttural breathing. Right behind me. I whipped around, my heart nearly stopping. The room was dark, the shadows thick, but there was something there. I couldn't see it clearly, just a figure, darker than the rest of the room, standing impossibly close. My blood turned to ice as the breathing grew louder, more labored, like whatever it was drawing closer, feeding off my fear. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over myself as I tried to get away, but there was nowhere to go. The room was too small, and that thing, it was getting closer. I could feel its presence pressing in on me, suffocating me. I've waited so long. The voice was right in my ear now, sending a chill down my spine, so intense it hurt. Tears welled up in my eyes as I pressed myself against the wall, trembling. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to stop until it had me. The door handle began to turn again, this time slowly, deliberately. The door creaked open. I didn't even dare to look. But deep down, I knew. I was no longer alone. The door creaked open with agonizing slowness. Each inch it moved, feeling like another second being shaved off my life. I didn't want to look, but my eyes were drawn to it, like I was hypnotized by my own fear. The darkness from the hallway bled into the room, swallowing the dim light that had once given me some semblance of safety. And then I saw it, a figure, tall, impossibly tall, filling the doorway. Its outline was blurry, like it didn't fully belong in this world, but the shape was unmistakable. There was something horribly human about it, and yet, not at all. It stood there, unmoving, blocking the only exit. I could hear that deep, raspy breathing, the sound of something too old, too wrong to be alive. My heart dropped into my stomach. I could barely breathe as I watched the figure step forward, its form shifting unnaturally in the dark. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything other than stand there like a terrified child, but my legs refused to move. I was paralyzed. It took another step, its feet heavy on the floor, and the temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath in front of me, little clouds of panic and terror escaping my lungs. My mind raced for an explanation. Anything that could make sense of this, but there was nothing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But every nerve in my body screamed that it was. The figure stopped at the foot of my bed, and for a moment, everything was still. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, boring into me, like it was peeling away layers of my soul. The pressure in the room was unbearable. I could feel it in my chest, pushing down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. "Why didn't you let me in?" The voice rasped, low and hollow, like it was coming from somewhere deep beneath the ground. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my mouth dry. All I could do was stare at the thing in front of me, my mind screaming at me to wake up, to do something. But I was trapped in my own body, paralyzed by fear. The figure leaned closer, and as it did, the shadows around it seemed to grow darker, thicker, like they were alive, pulsing with malevolence. It reached out, a hand, or something like a hand, emerging from the darkness. Long, thin fingers with nails that were too sharp, too long, extended toward me. I flinched, pressing myself back against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. The icy cold radiating from it seeped into my skin, chilling me to the bone. "You left me," it whispered, the words scratching at my ears. "You left me alone." My mind raced, trying to grasp what it was saying, trying to understand. Left it? What was it talking about? I didn't know this thing. I'd never seen it before in my life. But the way it spoke, the way it looked at me, it was like it knew me, like it had been waiting for me. The fingers brushed against my skin, cold as death, and I gasped, the touch sending a shock through my body. I finally managed to find my voice, though it came out as a shaky, barely audible whisper. I don't know you?" The figure paused, its head tilting unnaturally to the side, as if considering my words. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Then it leaned even closer, its breath cold against my face, and I could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on me. "You don't remember," it it said, and for the first time, I heard something in its voice, something like sadness, or maybe anger. But you will. And with that, the figure stepped back, fading into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. The door creaked shut on its own, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. My body finally gave in, and I collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. I was still trapped, and I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't finished with me. The darkness felt different now, heavier, thicker, like it was alive and pressing in on me from all sides. I lay on the floor, too scared to move, my mind racing through what had just happened. I couldn't explain it, couldn't make sense of it. But one thing was clear. The thing that had been in my room wasn't done with me. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling as I leaned against the wall for support. The silence was oppressive, but I knew that whatever it was still here, lurking, watching. I could feel it, even though I couldn't see it. I needed to get out. Now. I grabbed my phone again, praying for a signal, but the screen was as useless as before. No bars, no hope. I stuffed it into my pocket, my hands shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. The door was right there, just a few steps away, but it felt like miles. I took a deep breath and moved slowly, every creak of the floorboard sounding like a gunshot in the silence. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to explode. I reached the door and turned the handle, hoping that it wouldn't make too much noise. The door swung open slowly, revealing the dark hallway. I could barely see anything, but I didn't care. I wasn't staying in that room a second longer. I stepped into the hall, the air colder than before, the shadows seeming to ripple like they were alive. I kept my back to the wall, moving inch by inch toward the front door, toward escape. But as I crept through the hallway, that voice came again, soft and mocking, like it was coming from everywhere at once. "You won't leave me." I froze, my blood running cold. The voice was closer now, almost inside my head, wrapping around my thoughts like vines. I turned, looking down the hallway toward the bedroom. The door was wide open, and there, standing in the doorway, was the figure again. Only now it was clearer, its form more defined, like it had taken on more of this world. It wasn't just tall, it was grotesque, its limbs too long, its face a twisted mockery of a human's. Eyes black as coal stared at me from deep within its skull, empty and cold. Its mouth, if you could call it that, was stretched into a wide grin, teeth jagged and sharp. "I'm waiting," it whispered, and the grin widened, as if it knew I was trapped. Panic surged through me. I had to get out. I turned and bolted down the hall toward the front door, my feet pounding against the floor. But as I reached for the handle, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, the force of it nearly knocking me off my feet. I tried the handle, pulling with everything I had, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked, sealed. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. The figure was coming. "No, no, no," I screamed, pounding on the door, yanking the handle with all my strength. It wouldn't open. The footsteps grew closer. I could feel it now, breathing down my neck, that horrible cold breath. "I won't let you leave," it whispered, the voice now right in my ear. In desperation, I spun around, pressing my back against the door, ready to face whatever it was. But when I looked, the hallway was empty. The figure was gone. Silence. I stood there, shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. Maybe this was all in my head. I let out a sob of relief, sliding down to the floor, my body exhausted from the terror. But as I sat there, something caught my eye. Movement in the corner of the room. I turned my head slowly, my heart pounding again. There, in the shadows, was a mirror. A mirror I didn't remember having in the hallway. And in that mirror, I saw the reflection. The figure. But it wasn't standing behind me. It was me. I stared at the reflection, my breath caught in my throat, as the figure in the mirror grinned back at me, its black eyes filled with malice, its too wide mouth opening slowly. And then, in a voice that was both mine and not mine, it spoke. "You let me in." The lights flickered, and everything went dark. Thank you for watching. This video, like all the others on the channel, is made especially for you who love chilling content. I put a lot of care into creating each one. Please support the channel by subscribing so you won't miss any notifications and can help it grow. Be sure to watch the video on your screen now so we can stay connected. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. See you in the next one.